All right, hello everyone and welcome. For those of you here in Schaumburg, hope you're enjoying the show. I see familiar faces, so I believe everyone here knows the deal. All of the presentations being held in this room are also part of the NNP Symposium, meaning they are being live streamed over Zoom to an additional audience online. We have been running this as a fully virtual event since 2020, and this is our first hybrid cooperation with Central States. For everyone on Zoom, if you've attended a symposium before, it should be just like normal. So for this hour, we're going to be joined by Dr. Lawrence Brown of the CCAC to hear about their role in choosing coin designs. He was appointed to the CCAC in 2019 and holds the position of representing the general public. He now serves as the chair of the CCAC and is also a member of the ANS and a life member of the ANA. And he was inducted into the Hall of Fame of PCGS for his 1968 to present proof set of US coins. He is an addiction medicine and public health physician with academic distinctions from various medical and scientific professional organizations, as well as a decorated Vietnam War veteran. He now focuses on modern circulating and commemorative coins and traces his fascination with coins back to his adolescence in Brooklyn, where he was intrigued by the various ways in which history could be captured on such a small canvas. So, Dr. Brown, I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you could have just said guy from Brooklyn. That would have been good enough. For those of you who are not going to be attending in person, please forgive me. We didn't have enough popcorn to share for you to eat. For those of you that are here, please, in fact, pray for me because this is my maiden voyage, actually making a presentation outside of what I typically do in clinical research. So I'm going to be able to maybe take some from that to use this to help me around. But from time to time, I'm going to actually fall back on that. For example, as I'm going to talk about now, given that this is actually 1 o'clock local time, for those of us who are on the East Coast, so this has been at least now 2 hours. And that's important because I've been accused of having a monotony in terms of my voice. So I will then for those of you who felt that way, that because this is kind of shortly after your lunch, and it's taking you a while to digest that food in your GI tract, that is not because of my voice, it's because actually you're still digesting that great lunch. I'd like to begin with a summary about what I'm going to say. So for any reason, any of you happen to have heavy eyelids, at the very least, you will have at the beginning about the game plan and be able to say, well, I think I remember what he talked about. So in summary, I'm going to talk about ways in which to discuss the important stakeholders in coin and metal design. I'm going to then talk about those stakeholders are involved in that process. And then finally, I'm going to actually share with you the role of the CCAC, which is an informed and experienced and impartial resource to the Secretary of Treasury in terms of candidate designs. Now, I must tell you that when I began the journey of the CCAC, I actually began to find out about the CCAC. It was only because of the ANA. Having attended an annual meeting of the ANA and saw a public forum of the CCAC, I said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. At that point, I was actually further along in my professional career, so I could take the time to do so. It took me, the third time was the charm. As you heard earlier, I'm representing the interests of the public. But there's an important disclaimer I need to share with you. What I'm about to share with you, it represents my views, not of the US Mint. And by the way, I did have to have them clear and review some of the presentation, so as to make sure that I was sticking to that. So about this presenter, and you've heard a little bit about him, but I just want to be very clear and unequivocal because I'm of the opinion that speakers bring to the audience their own experiences, their own perspectives, their own worldviews. So I want to make sure you understand my worldview. I am a physician specialized in addiction medicine and public health. I'm a clinical associate professor of medicine at Weill Cornell. And regarding coin collecting, and as I heard earlier, I began at the age of 12, a member of the ANA, as well as the ANS. And I'm giving a special shout out to my local coin club, the Northern Valley Coin Club. I'm also, in fact, honored to be a member of the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee. And having served as its chair, this is my second term as chair, my first term as a member of the CCAC. It's a 4-year term. 2 more points I want to share with you. One, my focus is on modern circulating commemorative coins. It's not that I'm against classic coins, so I want to be very clear about that. It's just that I gravitate the modern because it represents the time at which I lived. So I can say, yeah, I remember that time, and say, put that into focus. And as you've heard, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I must say that in time when I was first discharged, that was not something that I said proudly. But I must say that as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate the value of doing so. So for that reason, I also lean towards themes that have a military theme. So again, my game plan is very simple. I'm going to talk about the coin and metal process. I'm going to also talk about the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, because I want to make sure that you all, in fact, who have interest in it, recognize what it means to, in fact, have that. Because I must confess, there are some things about it that I said, that was very interesting. And there are other things that I said, why do we do that? So, which is the reason why I'm here today, because I must confess, I did not understand or appreciate as much as many of us really should appreciate about what goes into coin and metal design in the United States and who are the important stakeholders. In that respect, I'm going to discuss 3 examples. I'm going to discuss a circulating coin example about the role and the impact of the CCAC. I'm going to discuss a commemorative coin example. And finally, I'm going to talk about a congressional gold medal. These all were designs and programs that occurred during my tenure at the CCAC. So I feel like I know a little something about that. So first, I want to be clear, because if we were in a live audience, I would do by a show of hands, how many of us are coin collectors? Okay, now I want you to be careful now. How many of us are numismatists? Okay, don't want to shake the hand. I'm not sure. I feel you. I understand that. The reason why I say that is that there are some definitions that I want to make sure for those who are budding coin collectors that we understand what we're talking about in terms of circulating coins. These are the devices, the instruments that we use to buy and sell goods and services, as opposed to, in fact, commemorative coins are used to commemorate a person, place, or thing or event in our nation's history. I'm going to talk about the congressional gold medals a little bit, but not a lot, because I only have 45 minutes, and I want to make sure I save a little something for you to invite me back. If I give you everything now, what's the use of going to invite me back, right? So I have to save a little something for that. So here's my next question. Who is the most important in the designing of U.S. coins and medals? So what I want, those of you who are participating virtually, I want you to write your response in the chat box so that my colleague will be able to see how many of us responded. For those of us here in person, I won't call you out, I promise you. But this is something that I find many in the public in general and many in the numismatic community don't really understand. The quick answer is you, me, all of us. And you may say, no, what is he talking about? I know he's in addiction medicine. Is that he's there because he, in fact, had a substance use problem? And that's why this. So you're going to find out more what I mean by that, because a lot of times we believe that it's just the government that's doing this. The reality is that we are the actually engines behind what goes into the designing the themes that we design for circulating and commemorative coins. There are other stakeholders. These other stakeholders include Congress, the President, the Treasury Secretary, United States Mint. Particularly, I want to acknowledge the over 1,600 dedicated members of the U.S. Mint working at their 5 U.S. Mint facilities. Then there are the advisory committees, and I'm going to go into detail about one, CCAC. And then there's the others that we don't realize that when we see these coins, there are other who's involved in the design process. When it comes to commemorative coins, it's the recipient organizations. And by the way, that may be a topic or another topic or a conversation we'll have in the future. And the Congressional Gold Medal liaisons, these are persons who come and advocate and actually participate in not just the theme, but also the design itself. Now, by the way, I didn't mention to you from time to time, I like to think that I can tell a joke and this and that. So feel free to smile at the very least if I say something, even if it's corny, okay? Feel free to say something. With the US Mint team, there's a Mint director herself. And this is the first time that we had an African-American Mint director, Ventress Gulf Gibson. The chief of the Office of Design Management, she's a phenomenal woman. Our chief engraver, the medallic artists and digital design staff, and these are phenomenal individual and artists who come to the Mint with their artistic experience and expertise to provide the information. There's a director of legislative and intergovernmental affairs who actually works with Congress to work out any details with respect to the legislation that leads to designs. And finally and foremost, is the senior legal counsel and the counsel of the CCAC. Now, those of us on the CCAC, there's 11 of us, sometimes we get the feeling that he's our counsel. Nah, he's the counsel to the CCAC, not the counsel to Larry Brown. Okay, so we've got to be clear on that. He's the counsel to that. With respect to the advisory committees, it's particularly important. The one that has been in existence for the longest time is the U.S. Commission on Fine Arts. They've been in existence since 1910 and have actually been involved with coin designs a little less of a period than that. The Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee is the other committee that I'm going to speak fondly about because I know it quite well, or at least I think so. I'm going to share with you a macroscopic view first of the design process, and I'm going to probably say, you're going to say, is he kidding? And you're going to see why I say that. This is a macroscopic design. You might say, this sounds like, for those of us in medicine and healthcare, we would say this sounds like a biological, in fact, process of the human body. But the reality is that I'm going to go at a microscopic so you can see it, but this is actually a picture that's actually on the US Mint website. So I'm going to go into more detail about that in the microscopic view. And that includes the fact at step number one, there's a new coin or metal program that's authorized through legislation. Now, you are involved in this process before the first step, because you are the ones who elect our senators and members of the House of Representatives. So for them to put legislation together, some United States citizen had to say, this was a good idea to have this theme. So you can see why you can't just say it's them that's responsible, because we have some ownership here too. So once they receive this theme, they put together the legislation for what we consider. They bring in together stakeholders with respect to the theme of that coin design and subject matter experts as well. And they, from time to time, depending on the program, they will bring in the CCAC at this point in the process. Not all the time, and there are reasons for that, because many times it doesn't really require the CCAC because it's not something that really they need to have that type of input at that stage of the process. Then the Mint sculptor and engravers. I mean, when you visit, and I welcome and I suggest you all visit the Philadelphia Mint, because you'll have the opportunity to actually to speak to some of the artists, because they are phenomenal individuals. They, in fact, many of them are part of the Artist Infusion program. There are some Mint staff engravers who are part of the staff that are not a part of that program. Periodically, every 10 to 15 years, the Mint actually has an opening request for those to participate in the Artist Infusion program. But they create the designs as a result of having a conversation with the stakeholders. Now, their artwork is reviewed first internally by the chief engraver and others at the Mint. And the revisions are made based on that, as well as in the next step, the stakeholders also review the designs. Where stakeholders will say, well, you know, that's a commemoration of someone that I knew, but that doesn't quite feel the way I felt about how she or he looked. So they will say, well, you know, he didn't actually have a mustache. or he didn't have his hair the way he did. So they will talk with the engravers and say, that doesn't work. And they do this before it even comes to the CCAC. So when we actually have the opportunity to review the themes and designs, the candidate designs, we have the opportunity to be able to ask those questions of the liaisons. And for the recently, April 18th, mark that in the calendar because that was the first time we actually came to have a meeting in person where we had the liaisons in the same room. That is a dynamic process. And I encourage as much as, with 11 members, as you're going to hear, we come from different parts of the country and coming to Washington, D.C., we love our nation's capital. Don't get me wrong, but we may not want to always travel there. But in my humble opinion, from Brooklyn, and by the way, I'm lobbying for Brooklyn to be a 51st state. As someone, going there to have the opportunity to discuss these designs, and particularly with the liaison, is a experience that I must confess I never knew I was going to have when I first joined the CCAC. So it was something that was value added and something that we as U.S. citizens say, hey, this is a reason and a way in which our coins are truly reflective of what we believe they should be. But we've got to be in the game. We can't be on the sideline and then complain about it. Because I've seen a lot of complaining. I won't tell you by what publications, maybe we'll keep that aside. But further revisions are made as a result of the input by the stakeholders. And the designs then are presented to the Commission of Fine Arts or the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee. The order in which it's presented to each one varies. Sometimes it goes to CFA first, sometimes it goes to CCAC first. And it depends on the scheduling of those two organizations as well as the Mint staff. But we meet separately. Sometimes we in the CCAC will know what the CFA has decided, what their recommendation is. And when I say that decided, I mean a recommendation to the Secretary of Treasury, because we do not decide on the designs. We make recommendations to the Secretary. Ultimately, the ultimate step is the Secretary actually makes the final decision. So that there are some things that go into that I'm also going to share for in part 2. So I've already had one additional meeting after this. I'm giving a second one. I gotta make sure there's value and continue this relationship. The Commission on Fine Arts has been in existence since 1910, and this is through an executive order at that time. And actually, to let you know, there are 7 members of this group, and for the most part, the major claims of fame are the architecture around Washington, D.C. That's the major claim of the fame. They are involved in coin design only recently in their history, but that has not always been the case. And the first African-American to actually be the member of the CFA was a gentleman named John Saunders Chase. Now, the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, the thing that's closest to my heart, established in 2003. And did you know? Oh, I'm going to get back to that later. And that we have 3 major objectives: to advise the Secretary on any theme or design proposals relating to circulating coins, bullion, congressional gold medals, and national and other medals. We also advise the Secretary with respect to commemorative coins. And thirdly, we make recommendations with respect to mintage levels. That really is not as much as one might think, because quite frankly, the legislation actually dictates what the ceiling is for the mintage. Now, with respect to these 11 individuals, you might say they're almost close to a jury, you might say. So these 11 individuals, 4 of them come from individuals who are recommended by either the majority or minority leader on the House or the Senate. One person is chosen because he or she is a numismatist. Another person is chosen because they have experience in metallic arts and sculpture. Another person is actually a curator in terms of metallic arts and sculpture. And there are 3 of us who represent the interests of the public. I'm one of those, the guy from Brooklyn. And to me, it was interesting to know, because I often at this stage of my development, by the way, I don't use that R word, I'm evolving, like Serena Williams, evolving to continue to embrace and be selectively engaged. The person who was the first African-American to actually join the CCAC, to be appointed to the CCAC, was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So we were appreciative of that fact, and that was during one of those times where I knew, in my life, I was saying to myself, coming growing up in Brownsville, I wanted to play basketball professionally. But at some time I found out pretty soon that wasn't the track for me. So I admire people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So when he then became a member of the CCAC, I was in fact applauding that. He didn't stay too long. But then I didn't have the pleasure of being on it at the time that he was there. But I'm fortunate to say that I was able to eventually get on the CCAC in 2019 and actually ultimately became their first chair of African-American ancestry. So the thing about being a chair on a board or committee, some people may think it is very easy. When you have 11 different people with different expertise, different worldviews, different perspectives, you have to have an opportunity for them to hear themselves and to hear each other. And that's not always easy, given what you have to do and the time that you have to do it. But I'm not going to be able to share with you in this session, so I guess that's number 4, about the uniqueness of that conversation that happens in that. That's a public meeting. There's a public meeting laws. We can't do that behind the closed curtain. We got to have that debate and discussion in the public. So it's an interesting phenomenon. The primary function of the CCAC, will be very clear, is to review coin and metal designs and make recommendations to the Secretary. In that respect, I have one request of you. We need more suggestions. There's an email address called info@ccac.gov to send your suggestions on themes pertaining to coins and metals. When you do that, then the CCAC has to take them into consideration and has to review them and make recommendations to the Secretary regarding your suggestions. So we just can't be 11 people to say, hey, we want to suggest this or that. We have to hear what the public has to offer. And I have to tell you, that's one of the things that is my primary focus while I continue to be the chair, is continue to underscore the fact that we're in this together. But that means we have to collaborate and communicate together to do so. We also produce an annual report. We're obligated to do so. And that report provides information about the CCAC. That's available at the website. Now that's an electronic version, but I've been told that even those of us in my unique category are using the website even more effectively and efficiently than people may have thought. So that annual report is there for you to review and make a comment and say, hey, I don't like that. What the heck you guys got that from? But you kind of say it by communicating to us, not about us, to us. So guess who just celebrated their 20th birthday? See, I got you now, because you weren't looking at my slides closely enough. Mr. Board. CCAC celebrated its 20th anniversary. About 5 days ago, it celebrated its 20th anniversary and actually began its first meeting on May 15th, 2003. So what I have here is a picture of 9 of us 11. And for those of you, I can't really do this, well, just to let you know, I'm not the tallest guy in that picture. I'm on to maybe your left, the guy with that nice bow tie. I like to rock the bow tie from time to time. I spared you this time, but from time to time I do that. But we have here, actually displayed here, we have 2 of the, I like to believe, probably the most preeminent person in metal collection. And Donald Staminsky is on the far left. And in the middle of this, we have our historian, Dean. We have our new members of our committee that just joined. Actually, Darla, who's the female here. And we females, we need your experience and input. And we have Kellen Wyans, excuse me. Helen and Darla just started CCAC this past April. So I'm going to give you the first example. First example is the American Women's Quarters Program. And it was part of a larger piece of legislation that is phenomenal. Many of us didn't realize how phenomenal this legislation is. The American Quarters Program is only one portion of it. But it was actually meant to actually have a new, allow the Mint to have a new consideration, new likeness of George Washington, other than that began in 1932. To show you what I mean by that, on the left-hand side is the 1932 to 2021 outburst of George Washington. From 2022 to 2025, what you see is the design on the right. So, and this design came from the fact that, and can you guys hold a secret? If I can say something, I just want to be sure. Because if it gets out, I'll know who it is. I want you to know that. So the sculptor, Laura Gardner Fraser, she competed in a design back in 1932, and her design actually won the contest, but her design was not accepted to be in fact used by the United States, by the then Treasury Secretary. We won't name, no names. Okay. Right. But her design actually also came to our attention, those of us who are involved in commemorative coins, as you will see the 1999 gold commemorative coin that was commemorating again George Washington. So the Mint actually provided these designs. This was not the only one, but this was a design that was in fact recommended by both the CCAC and the Commission on Fine Arts for the American Women's Quarters obverse. It also included in this legislation, this portion of the legislation, that up to 5 quarters would be minted each year to represent unique reverse designs, celebrating and highlighting women with diversity in fields of accomplishment. They should honor women ethnically, racially, and geographically diverse backgrounds. Regarding these were the way that the Mint was able to get these designs and recommendations. They reached out to the Smithsonian, the National Women's History Museum, and a bipartisan women's caucus. The secretary actually then ultimately select a group of designs for presentation to the selected the women, and then the designs for presentation to the CCAC and the CFA. Now, I know all of you, because you said you were collectors. So I know that each and every one of you have one of these quarters from 2022, because you would not be in this room. You would not be at this meeting if you did not have that, because you are at least collectors. And then some of you said you're numismatics. So we have these famous Americans, and the CCAC, we had an opportunity to hear the liaisons associated with each of these women. For Maya Angelou, we actually heard from her son prior to his passing. And he shared with us why he also embraced the design that we finally also recommended to the secretary. And by the way, I'm proud to say, remember I told you I'm a modern guy? These are pictures of my collection. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So then for 2023, our current year, and I know that many of you already have seen these coins too, at least seen the first two, Bessie Coleman, you've had to see that. In fact, this program has the reputation, now the impression that it's likely to be the most embraced program since the state quarters. And this is an opportunity for us to do a better job to include women of the stronger gender. I shall say no more. And these are in fact the designs that were actually chosen. So these are already recommended by the CCAC and the CFA, and the secretary has actually approved these designs that they're being produced. The first one on your left and the one on your far right have already been released by the Mint. These were the women that we had an opportunity to hear their stories. So for each of these designs, members of the CCAC, we heard from their liaison, whether it was a child, whether it was their auntie, whether it was in fact a cousin. We heard from them as to why they embraced this design, why they didn't embrace this design. And to me, that's very powerful, because as much as we as collectors and numismatists may think that this is the best way to go, it's made the best, we have to balance between the art and the history and the liaisons, because they are the ones who can best tell the story. To not embrace what they have to offer really is a lost opportunity. And to let you know, for 2024, these are the ones that we currently have considered already. And to share with you how we did that. So in this slide, on your far left, the ones that for Santa Cruz, and just the numbers at the bottom give you a sense about how many different candidate designs we had to choose from. It was not just one or two. So in the Celia Cruz, we had to choose from six designs from obverse and reverse, which to come up with six designs for the reverse, because this is just reverse one, for it to be actually displayed. So during this time that we actually did this program, we look at the 23, 30, 35, 38 different candidate designs from which we had to choose reverses for each of these 5 coins. And that really meant a lot of conversations with respect to negative space, with respect to the design element, with respect to which are going to be the inscriptions beyond that is required by the federal government. So these are things that we take into consideration and hear from the liaisons about what they feel about it. Well, that's example number 1. Example number 2 is a commemorative coin design. And this one was from 2022. This is actually the Negro Museum, Negro Baseball Museum. They were the recipient organization. This one itself is Andrew Forster. He was actually the one who most led that league during the time that he was actually involved in it. The recipient organization, again, was the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And for those of you in Kansas City, you have a treasure there. You need to visit that museum. And those of us who are not from Kansas City, please make your way to see Kansas City, because that museum actually displays these, in fact, outstanding and accomplished individuals who did great work. And I so love this design. You know, to me, I'm not really, you might say, the world's best baseball advocate, but this design tells the story of the pitcher pitching that ball, and then the batter at the plate waiting to hit it, or not hit it, miss it. To me, for coins to be able to tell a story of obverse and reverse, that's a phenomenal thing. This is the effect of the clad coin, clad half dollar. So this was a 3-coin design, the 6 sides that we actually had to look through and come up with this. So in this, for example, the clad, we had 21 different candidate designs to choose from. That means that each and every one of the 11 members has an opportunity to share his or her opinion about each design, why they like it, why they think it would probably measure up. And we hear from the liaison. The liaison actually tells us what they prefer. And then we have a conversation with the liaison. In some cases, we may want to say, well, would you be willing to have a design that's more artistic than the one that you prefer? Sometimes they would agree, other times, not so much. Example 3, the Harlem Hellfires. Remember I said that I'm a military veteran? I would like funds that have that military theme. This was a story that I did not know. Now, I don't have a passport to go into Manhattan, even though I'm from Brooklyn. But I was trained at Harlem Hospital. And this, in fact, facility where they were trained at, it was only about 10 blocks away. So it was good for me to hear the story because I had never known about it. Over 105 years ago, more than 1,500 Well-developed, well-nourished, that's a term that we often use in medicine. We're describing a patient as a well-developed, well-nourished before we explain the rest of them. These were, in fact, men at the highest level of their performance, who were assigned to the 15th New York National Guard and were sent to France. But after they were just changed to that and redesignated as the 369th Infantry Unit. Because of racial discrimination, their infantry training was not completed before they went to France. They were assigned to non-fighting tasks once they got to France, and to assigned to fight under the French command. Now, at that time, General Pershing said no Americans would be fighting under anything but an American flag. But because of the fact that there was a need for information, please forgive me, these people, I don't know why they wouldn't talk to me. Okay. Because of the need for troops during World War I, Pershing finally agreed to allow the African-American troops to fight under the French command. Despite the fact they had substantial injuries, they never lost a foot of ground and had never had any one of their members captured by the enemy. Now, these were individuals that didn't get robust infantry training before they went to France again. They had spent more days on the front than any other American unit at that time, and they're the first Allied troops to reach the River Rhine as a part of the French Army occupation. They were awarded the highest French medal for their accommodations, and one of those, Sergeant Henry Johnson, was famous because he, by himself, had fought off an entire German unit while saving his colleagues. And even though he had done so, he did not receive the Purple Heart, did not receive the Congressional Medal of Honor while he was living. Now, I tell you this not because I found out about this after the fact. I found out about this during a meeting of the CCAC. The liaisons helped to educate us about the significance of the designs in which we were about to review. These were the designs we actually recommended. So on the left is the obverse, on the right is the reverse that we recommended. To let you know, on the left, we had 13 candidate designs to consider. And on the right, we had another 12 to consider. Now, these, well, they have need to be some adjustments, but to let you know, to hearing from these liaisons, that was probably the longest period of time during the time that I've served on the CCAC that we spent to talk about a particular program. And this was just two back and forth. This was not like you had a lot of designs to talk about. You had a very few, roughly speaking. So in summary, all of us, Americans, are the most important at coining metal design. Coining metal designs involve the legislative branch and the executive branch, and involve a number of advisory committees, including the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, for which I, again, am indebted to have the honor and privilege to do so. The CCAC serves as an informed, experienced, and impartial resource to the Treasury Secretary. With that respect, I want to again acknowledge the many folks who are circulating coins, that, for example, those liaisons that were involved with those involved with congressional gold medals and national medals, and which can remember the coins. And certainly the current and former members of the CCAC, the former members actually set the foundation for many of us on the current CCAC to do the work that we do. And of course, the dedicated members who work at the U.S. Mint facilities. Oftentimes they don't get what is due them because people take them for granted, but they do a lot of great work. So remember, it's up to you to decide. Remember the website, usmint.gov, about coins, about this, talk to get to the CCAC, info@ccac.gov. And of course, this guy from Brooklyn, CasaBrown@AOL.com. Thank you so much.
Give me just a moment. I'll get set up for Q&A here. Yeah. All right, and I'm going to have you step to the side behind the table here. And turn this off.
You don't want me to influence the question.
All right, so the Q&A will be open to both those viewers on Zoom and in the room. If you are on Zoom, just click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and send in questions. All of them will be read off anonymously, so you don't need to worry about that. We don't have any that came in during the presentation, so I'm going to start with anyone in the room. Yes.
First off, Dr. Brown, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
As our designs become more inclusive, and maybe there's a question for Ralph too, are we seeing hints of women, girls, and minorities getting into the hobby? Because you look around upstairs and it's pretty homogeneous. Any hints that we're making progress on this lecture front?
Well, I can tell you with the evolution of the CCAC, we're getting a more diverse group of individuals who actually speak to that issue about greater diversity. And in our deliberations, you will hear them say that this design is something that most people can say they believe it's them. It represents them as something that they can aspire to be. So the American Women's Program actually has the greatest impetus for that. And in that respect, we need as much of us to be engaged and having our children, both girls and boys, our nieces, to make sure that we tell them and spend time to tell them the story and figure out ways to tell them the story. Because it really is on us to make sure that that is more reflective of our country. And we're seeing that happen because when you look at the designs, the American Women's Quarters, you didn't see that, in fact, in the decades before that. When you look at the designs with respect to persons of different ethnic groups, again, the American Women's Quarter actually was the first, well, was not the first, was the next shot across the bow to actually have a greater diversity among the women who actually are the stronger gender.
Thank you.
All right, we do have one on Zoom I'm going to get to, and then we'll open it back up to the room. How often does the CCAC meet?
The CCAC will meet sometimes between 4 to 6 times a year. Depends on the programs that are actually available for review. So with the American Women's Quarter and the Innovation Dollar and the Native American Dollar, is likely for those programs there would be separate meetings. There sometimes we'll have more than one program in a meeting, as in April the 18th, but that's a rarity to have 4 programs that you're meeting in a single day.
All right, then yes.
A question about the CCAC example. Regarding the 3 public sector people, what is the scope or focus of your review? And do you feel that the other members listen to you? And
that's a very good question. And I suspect that there are members who will certainly hear you because of the fact that you bring a different perspective. So, for example, I'm the only person who's a veteran of CCAC. So almost anything I say, they will listen to me about that. They will hear about that. Oh, that's something else. Okay. The things pertaining to communities that have been underrepresented. The thing is that, particularly with our Harlem Hellfighters, there was a robust discussion among all the members, all the CCAC members. The thing that they raised particularly so is that why did it take so long for this congressional gold medal to be in fact legislated? And that's something that some of my colleagues would say, hey, Larry, we know why it took so long. So I don't know why you think that you don't know why it took so long. We know why it took so long. So you're starting to hear that many of them will still look at the art, but they will also listen to the story. As much as I'm not an expert in the artistic side, I'm not a sculptor, I'm not a medallic artist, but I feel the stories. And one of our former CCAC members often would say, she looks at it as the tabletop test. If you put a coin in the table, would it attract you based on the design? Not every coin will do that, but there are some coins designed that you will say, I wonder what that means. I wonder what the story is behind that. So let's talk more about that. But sometimes we also have a conversation about how subtle should the design be. Sometimes the design can be so subtle that it will not get the attention that you might think it deserves. So in some cases, you have to add a narrative to go along with that subtle design or to actually really hit home. Because if you expect people to always Google it up, come on now.
All right, online. Are there any plans to recognize the contributions made by Mexican Americans?
There actually are. And we actually, in the American Women's Quarters program, actually, that is actually one of those Mexican Americans who actually is being recognized in the next quarter, Adita Idar. She's the next woman to be recognized on American Quarter Reverse. Adita Idar.
Okay. Anyone else in the room? Yes.
Do you have a working budget? And if you do, what is it?
That is a question that we often ask ourselves. We do not know what that budget is, but at the same time, the Mint does in fact appreciate that the CCAC came to existence due to legislation. So it's a partnership between the legislative and executive branch of government. And the legislative branch of government said that they wanted a voice through the CCAC to be able to speak to things dealing with a coin and metal design. So through that, for example, we will make it clear that we like to have a public forum. We'll make it clear that we like to visit one of the mints. We just came from visiting the Philadelphia Mint. So there'll be times that we want to share more about what we do or the unique way in which we have robust discussions.
Right, online. What do you think about creating a series of designs that show affiliation between the US and their allied countries?
That's a phenomenal and good question. We need more of them. See, what happens then, there's two routes that you as a citizen can take. You can take that idea and go to your elected officials on the Senate and House side and talk with them about it. Or you can send us your recommendation through that email. Now, all of those of you who in fact sent your chat through there, I'm expecting to see that number of emails. Because, without us being able to show that there is a continuing interest by the Americans in their designs for their country, that doesn't get reflected. So we need you to actually have a greater voice to share with us designs that you think will be useful. We're going to still need your assistance at that because from the CCAC, we just make recommendations to the secretary. But actually the legislation is really key for actually executing that design theme, that actually theme.
All right, anyone else in the room? Yes.
Yeah, so on the subject of legislation, if we go back a generation, we see people like Harstack, a coin dealer, Beth Deisher, a coin world editor, were testifying in front of Congress, the coinage subcommittee on various aspects of what that was going to do. And I'm curious, do we still have that same voice within Congress, or are CCAC members, for example, sometimes getting involved at that stage of things?
That's a very good question. And from time to time, over the history of the CCAC, there have been members who've actually had conversations with elected officials. And mostly it's because they want to hear our voice about what makes a coin more attractive. But I do believe there is a need for more of that. And one of the things that you and the public can actually use to help you out, this legislation is a public record. So you can find out who was the ones that actually sponsored the legislation. And sometimes, depending on the actual design, the actual theme, it will go through pretty quickly. Other times it will die on the vine. So we need you to be able to say, don't let that die on the vine. We need you to push that forward.
All right.
Second question.
Can we do one more online and we'll come back to you? Okay. Do you know if there's a similar group who inputs on the designs of our paper currency?